I want to explore three different price scenarios when it comes to Manta in an event where maybe, let's say, there is a fully fledged type of altcoin season. However, this is just my perspective. There is no guarantees and nothing I say is financial advice. However, even besides that, my first price scenario that I want to take a look at when it comes to Manta is arguably the idea of $4, a 20x from here, and market cap at that point, considering current circulating supply, would be nearly 1.8 billion. Now, why wouldn't this be something that would surprise me in an event where, let's say, we do see a fully fledged type of altcoin season? It's because I'm a big fan of the fundamentals of Manta. Let me explain what I mean by this. The Manta network offers two networks. The first is something called Manta Pacific, but this is in no specific order, but again, Manta Pacific and as well as Manta Atlantic. And let me explain this real quick. Like, for instance, if we take a look at Manta Pacific, it's the modular layer 2 ecosystem on Ethereum for Ethereum Virtual Machine native ZK applications. Now, what does ZK stand for, right? ZK stands for zero knowledge. Now, why do I think it's pretty cool? It's because, for instance, allegedly, the benefit of zero knowledge technology is, for instance, allowing for greater scalability and enhancing privacy. And again, if we take a look at, for instance, I did also mention how the Manta Pacific, right? Or should I say Manta Pacific, the modular layer 2 ecosystem on Ethereum for Ethereum Virtual Machine native ZK applications. Why do I think it's pretty cool? It's because I want to focus on that layer 2 aspect real quick. If we take a look at, let's say, for instance, generally speaking, when it comes to layer 2 for Ethereum, I think arguably, if I were to put in very simple terms, it's kind of allowing for Ethereum to be enjoyed while at the same time not necessarily having to deal with some of the drawbacks. Like, what do I mean by this? Ethereum, of course, adoption is very fantastic. Of course, again, it's just very popular overall. But then when I take a look at the gas fees, which are arguably sky high, I'm not a fan of that. I just don't like it that much. Not to mention, I take a look at the arguable scalability issues when it comes to Ethereum, which I'm also not a fan of. So then what kind of steps in while kind of solving that a little bit, right? Arguably, I would say, while at the same time allowing for Ethereum to be enjoyed? Something like a layer 2, and in this case, a layer 2 for Ethereum. Now, there's a bunch of Ethereum layer 2s out there, but I'm just saying this is generally speaking kind of just the overview I have when it comes to that. So then when it comes to, again, something like Manta Pacific, I am a fan of it. I don't think it's necessarily something that is not cool or that interesting. I don't view it that way. I actually find it pretty cool and pretty interesting. Now, if I take a look at Manta Atlantic, right? And again, now that I've explained Manta Pacific, I want to hop into Manta Atlantic real quick and talk about that. This is allegedly the fastest ZK, and again, ZK, like I mentioned before, zero knowledge, but again, it's supposedly the fastest ZK layer 1 chain on Polkadot. Now, why does this matter? It's because if we take a look at Polkadot, I'm going to explain this real quick just to give some context, right? Polkadot is focused on connecting blockchains together. It's quite essentially focused on something called interoperability. It's because lacking interoperability, I think, is actually supposedly kind of a big issue, I would arguably say, because if we take a look at, for instance, there's many networks out there, many blockchains out there, right? And because some of them that I do see, they're independent of one another, they don't have this ability in some cases to freely send data and value to each other. And if that were to be the case, that means they do lack interoperability, allegedly, in that instance. Now, let me use a very popular example, Bitcoin and Ethereum. Because they're independent of one another, they supposedly can't freely send data and value to each other. Allegedly, they lack interoperability. And what steps in? Quite essentially something like Polkadot. So that's kind of how cool Polkadot is. And now that I've mentioned that, again, Manta Atlantic, supposedly the fastest ZK layer 1 chain on Polkadot, I think that is pretty impressive considering just how massive Polkadot is. And also, we take a look at, for instance, right? We will see something called the Calamari network. Now, when people take a look at this, they're like, okay, what is this, right? Basically, the Calamari network is the canary network to the Manta network. And now some people may be thinking, okay, who cares about this? Well, let's take a look at the success of Kusama, which is actually the canary network to Polkadot. And again, I just mentioned Polkadot early on before, right? And let me explain this real quick. Kusama, what I mean by, a canary network to that, right? If I were to explain in simple terms, typically if a project wants to launch on Polkadot, sometimes what I do see is that people start off with Kusama first. And eventually, after they test out the project and everything like that, then eventually they move on later to Polkadot. Now, why would they do something like that? It's because Kusama, supposedly, it's cheaper to rent building space when compared to Polkadot. So this could maybe be advantageous for, let's say, a developer or, let's say, a team that may just be starting off and may not necessarily just want to jump straight into Polkadot. Not to mention, it's supposedly easier to make changes on Kusama when compared to Polkadot. So it just kind of, I think, has more kind of arguable advantages as opposed to just starting head on when it comes to Polkadot. But again, it doesn't mean that a project has to move on eventually later to Polkadot if they don't want to. Like, we take a look at, for instance, something like Moonriver that's on Kusama. So again, that's kind of basically the gist of it. So if I take a look at something like the Calamari network, it's basically something like that, but then for the Manta network. You know what I mean? Because again, the Calamari network is the Canary network to the Manta network. And again, if we take a look at something like, for instance, Manta Atlantic, which is supposedly, like I mentioned before, allegedly, the fastest ZK layer 1 chain on Polkadot, I think this whole thing kind of makes sense in the grand scheme of things. And again, this is just the way I take a look at Manta. I don't think it is useless or something like that. I like the use case, I like the utility, and this just kind of gives me the vibe that it's not a project that's going to disappear once the fans or hype isn't there, let's say, for the project, because I think the utility is actually there. But even besides all that, when I take a look at the idea of $4, it wouldn't surprise me in an event where maybe it did happen when it comes to Manta during a fully fledged stable altcoin season. Now, I do want to take a look at the second price scenario that I have on my mind, and that is $4.50. At 22.5x from here, market cap at that point, considering current circulating supply, would be around 2 billion. Now, why wouldn't that market cap surprise me that much? I mean, we've basically seen, like Dogecoin, pretty much 40x that, right? 40 times that in terms of market cap back in 2021, and that was years ago. And I'm not saying that this is going to be more popular or something like that, but then just achieving a glimpse of what it did years ago, and again, it's not like it's even 10% of that. It's not something that would necessarily surprise me if, let's say, maybe were to happen, but only time will tell. Now, the third and final price scenario I want to take a look at is maybe the idea of $5. A 25x from here and market cap at that point, considering current circulating supply, would be around 2.2 billion. The reason why this wouldn't necessarily surprise me is because in the peak of the 2021 bull run, there was around 300 million crypto owners. Now we allegedly have over 600 million, so it's way more. And arguably, I don't think we've seen a fully fledged type of altcoin season. And with that amount of crypto owners, what would happen if, let's say, we did see one, if the 2021 bull run with far less, crypto owners supposedly was able to already do that? And now some people may arguably say, oh, but there's more competitors as of right now. Totally aware that there are, more projects that are famous right now, arguably, I would say, when compared to back then. But then at the same time, I think Manta just plays a very unique role. And I think Polkadot arguably is very massive, right? It's very popular. So then to me, with all those, factors, I would say, if we did see arguably $5 when it comes to Manta, it wouldn't surprise me, but this is just my mindset. Now, some people may be thinking, okay, what is the timeline though? Like, how soon? Now, personally for me, what I can do is just take a look at clues from the past. This is the way to take a look at it. Typically, as a worst case scenario, altcoins, they usually peak around 18 months after a Bitcoin halving event. And again, this is as a worst case scenario, usually. And the last Bitcoin halving event happened in April of last year. So 18 months on top of that, October of this year in 2025, supposedly if we do use that timeline. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen at that time, because it could be different this time around. Who knows, right? That is based off history. Like, maybe it could happen in November, December, or even Q1 of 2026, somewhere along, like maybe January, February, March, something like that. Only time will tell. But whenever that timeline is, that is going to be beyond my control. So I'm just going to control myself, which is just dollar cost averaging, holding, and just waiting. That's it. I'm just staying patient. I'm just waiting for a moment in time, as opposed to trying to find the perfect moment to enter, because I won't be able to find the perfect moment. So I'm just going to be, again, dollar cost averaging, holding, and just preparing and just waiting. That's it. I'm going to stay patient, and feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Greatly appreciate it. It's Lonely the Captain, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.